So, Mr Deputy Speaker, here we are. Little more than 18 months since the end of lockdown, and this government has gone from clapping to slapping key workers. And, you know, it didn't have to be this way. In the wake of COVID, this government had a choice. It could have, like the 1945 Labour government at the end of World War II, chosen a new path, a different path, a new social settlement that recognised the sacrifice and efforts of key workers. It could have rewarded them by embarking upon collective sectoral bargaining, invested in rebuilding our public services, in housing, after more than a decade of decay. It could have built a new social settlement recognising the role those workers played in that national crisis. Instead, it chose to look to the First World War and Geddes' Acts, when the post-war Conservative government slashed public spending, attacked workers' rights and told the poor that they, and not the wealthy, must bear the brunt of the costs of the war. Mr Deputy Speaker, this legislation puts beyond a shadow of doubt whose side this government is on. It's certainly not the public. No, it's not the public. Because these public sector workers being denied their democratic rights are the public.
Exactly.
They're the ones defending public services, not this government. Exactly. They're the ones fighting to stop trains without ticket offices. They're the ones fighting to stop railways with reduced numbers of safety precautions. The ones fighting to stop a healthcare system run from Silicon Valley by surveillance companies like Palantir. They're the ones fighting for our education system where 44% of teachers plan to leave within 5 years. No, this government is on the side of employers like P&O, British Gas, British Airways, with a bill that gives a green light to the practitioners of fire and rehire, of poverty pay and a race to the bottom. And yes, as ever, it's on the side of the rich and wealthy, like it's always been. But this legislation is also part of a longer-term anti-democratic trend. This bill is part of a long raft of anti-democratic legislation passed by this government. It's a trend of transferring power away from workers and citizens and eliminating the limited rights and freedoms in the workplace and across society. The Police and Crime Sentencing Act of 2022 criminalised political protest. The Elections Act of 2022 will disenfranchise millions through voter ID. You undermine the independence. They've undermined the independence of the Electoral Commission. The Judicial Review and Courts Act limits the power of courts to remedy unlawful government action on the part of the executive. The National Borders Act. 6 million people in this country can now be stripped of their citizenship at the whim of the Home Secretary. And while they have temporarily gone quiet, we know they want to repeal the Human Rights Act as well. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, the British public have had enough of being told by this government to suck up failing privatised public services, corrupt politicians, collapsing living standards, a dying environment and a failing democracy. Being told there is no alternative, that politicians will always be caught on the take, that the rich and powerful will always be able to buy influence, that food banks are inevitable, that the NHS will always be in crisis, that our rivers will always be polluted, that a race to the bottom on employment rights is inevitable. History will show this bill as the act of a government on the ropes, bereft of direction, lashing out at the very public it claims to protect. It's a grim 50-year-old ideological experiment, and it's in tatters all around it. I'll be voting against this piece of rubbish.